So, why are we here? So what? What is the purpose of this? Well, I guess it's all because I wonder if you're anything like me, and I wonder how often you might have wondered to yourself some things along the lines of, "Is this all there is to my life?" We'll start small, right? Is this all there is to my existence? Or have you ever wondered to your thought to yourself, I thought I was supposed to be something or have something or be doing something different by now? Or do you find yourself thinking, why am I not fulfilled in this job or role or relationship that I was once fulfilled in? Like, where did the fulfillment go? Or Reagan, you talk about this meaningful life thing, and I was excited to support you tonight, but what's even a meaningful life? What does that look like? Um, or maybe your brand is you feel like you're running out of time. You feel like it's just going by so fast, and you want to make sure that you're making the most of your days here on Earth. Uh, I believe all of those questions that I just posited, all of those thoughts we might have felt, I believe that they all have to do with our relationship with participation. I believe that has to do with our relationship with the decision to participate in our life. All of those questions or doubts that I just mentioned, they're all connected to our tendency as humans to believe that fulfillment or meaning or satisfaction is somewhere else, is further down the line, is not here. But if there's one thing that you hear today, I hope that you hear the word participation. I believe for us to live a meaningful life, we must first get clear on what it looks like for us to participate. But participation is scary. It's easier to believe that the days ahead are going to be better. But when we don't participate, we miss our lives. So we need to get clear on what is preventing us from participating so that we don't miss our lives, so that we can rediscover what it looks like for us to be fully engaged and have meaning in every moment. So for me, what gets in my way of participating is generally fear. I'm afraid of doing things wrong, or I'm afraid of not being approved by others, or I'm afraid that I might be missing out on the correct life path. So sometimes I'll just stand back and not participate. Is anyone with me? Does anyone worry about doing things wrong or not being approved of by others? Yeah. Or maybe you missing, if I pick this one, then I'm gonna miss another opportunity that might be good. So I grew up in a pretty religious household, lots of good memories and lots of terrifying memories. I don't get why we think it's a good idea to talk about eternal damnation with 5-year-olds because we're listening and it means something to us. So I remember one day I'm 6 years old and I wander into the room of the house and I can't find my parents. I don't know where they are. And so instead of like jumping on the bed like I'm in Home Alone or like binging on cookies or watching something I shouldn't watch on TV, I run around to the house and I turn on all the water faucets to see if blood comes out because in Revelation it says that like the water's gonna turn to blood. Like so at a young age, I'm worried. Did I miss the rapture? At 6 years old, did I already blow this so bad? Did I do something wrong that I missed heaven? Okay, so then this carries on. Uh, I worry about doing life right or wrong, and so as a result, that causes me to not participate as much. I stand on the sidelines. I don't know if this happens to you. I stand on the sidelines and I miss part of my life. I'm a bystander. In high school, theater was a thing that I was getting good at, and I offered a chance to be in a play. It was called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. It's a musical and it's hilarious. And there's a character that's a eunuch. A eunuch is a man who's got his man parts cut off, and so he's got a really high voice, and he had some flamboyant tendencies. And I wanted to do this play. I wanted to be a part of something bigger than myself so bad. I didn't have a social life, but I remember being worried. What are my parents going to think about me being a eunuch? Are people going to think that I'm gay because I'm playing a character that has flamboyant tendencies? So instead of participating in my life, I watched another year of my life pass by because I'm afraid of doing it wrong. And I'm afraid of consequences. I said no, and I continued to be a passive participant until one night I'm at a Steak and Shake. I'm a junior in high school. And this guy that I kind of knew from middle school, like elbows me in the back. He says, "Hey, what are you doing after you finish your steak burger?" I turn around and it's this guy named Charles, who I knew from middle school, but we weren't really that good of friends. He said, there's a middle school building where there's two parts of a roof and there's a big gap between it with a 20-foot drop. I'm going to try and jump over it later. Do you want to come with me? Well, I didn't have much going on other than eating the Steak and Shake. So I decided that I was going to go with him. And we jump over this gap in this roof. And afterward, we go back to his house and we watch Dead Poets Society. I'd never seen Dead Poets Society, and it's about young men realizing what it is to live a life of adventure and meaning. And for the first time in my life, the words carpe diem actually meant something. The rest of my high school career turned into an adventure with this guy named Charles and with guys like Nathan, who's on the call tonight, where on the weekends, we would have an adventure that we would invite people to. We would build potato launchers. We threw a birthday party every year for this girl named Lisa Wang, who we didn't even know, but we just threw her a birthday party and it blew her mind every single year. So all of a sudden, I realized that I could see in color if I chose to. I could participate and the consequences weren't as high. But over the course of my life, we can't keep that. We can't always live in a constant state of full on engagement and participation. We go through seasons where we miss it. And so there's been seasons in my life where I forget and I live life on the sidelines and then I weave back into participation. And participating in our lives, it's not always adolescent adventure. I've realized it's small things as well. Um, it's about being present. Just this morning, I was walking my dog to get some coffee and I stopped by the stream where there's these fish that swim under it. And when the sun's just right, I can stick my arms out over the water and they cast a shadow into the water. And if I move my arms, the shadow scares the fish. And so I can guide the fish where I want them into this stream. And people are driving by and I look like I'm conducting some imaginary orchestra. But and I wonder in moments like this to myself, I wonder, does anyone else feel this? Does anyone else sense this? Do they have small moments where they stop dead in their tracks and remember that there is a miracle in living, even in the smallest of moments? Even in the smallest of moments that sometimes we forget. So I needed to remember to do this. So I started writing something for myself, for my own soul. And I believe that oftentimes the best way for us to make a meaningful contribution to the world is to discover what we need in order to heal and to share that with other people. And so here we are tonight, gathered to talk about participating in our lives, even if we don't feel like it all the time, so that we don't miss this moment in front of us and the next one and the next one. So I lost all my business because of COVID and I had a lot of time to think. And I've got a wonderful girlfriend who pushed me to say, Reagan, you do all these business workshops and you're having fun with professional and personal development. But what's the other thing that you want to say? What's the deeper content that you really want to talk about? What would be thrilling for you to share? And it's this. So we started writing and some chapters started to come. And I'm thrilled to share some of them with you tonight. So I'd like to read the introduction to you. The working title of the book is called Don't Miss This. The subtitle is Finding Meaning in Your Regular Life. I'm sitting on my porch and the sun has just started to peek its head over the trees. Summer mornings are such a long affair, like an Indian wedding. It gets light hours before the sun reaches our backyard. And when it does, it's like the bride just rounded the corner and buckets full of pure love spill out onto the grass and wash up against our shed. The bees are hard at work pollinating the purple hearts in the flower bed. And ambitious bamboo stalks rise up in the middle of the yard like stray hairs of a unibrow, despite my best efforts to keep the growth under control. And there's a street just a few dozen yards in front of me where the traffic is lighter than normal, but picking up. We're now over 2 months into the reality of a world rocked by the coronavirus. Oh, and the small tree in our neighbor's yard has purple flowers now, and some have fluttered onto our side of the fence. And I almost forgot its branches smell like syrup. One more thing, the cardinals circling our lot remind me of romance, and the lizard living in the hollow of the tall tree has come out to perform his sun salutation. And I saw one of our new neighbors on a walk with their puppy, who has doubled in size in 6 weeks. I've literally seen this dog expand its outline slowly each day. It's almost too much, and it's always been here. Sometimes when I choose to see how beautiful life is, in the midst of all the uncertainty, I nearly burst into blossom, as James Wright says in his poem, A Blessing. And all of this has compelled me to write down these sentences and the words which follow. I want to give you back the world which has always been yours. I want to help you remember there is magic everywhere, all the time. I want to guide you to a remembering you thought you'd forgotten, like Peter Banning in the film Hook, as Tinkerbell guides him to summon what really matters in his life, his happy thought, so he can fly again, so he can re-enter his life and do the difficult things he needed to do by returning to a simple and forgotten sense of wonder. Learning to experience wonder is a daily commitment, and the following pages will guide you through stories, reflections, and practices to help you wake up. Hopefully, you'll embrace them and share them with others, both in your personal life and your place of work, because I believe the best leaders, the most effective managers, the most intentional parents, the pastors and nonprofit leaders who reach the unreachable, and the entrepreneurs who build truly remarkable engines of service all have one thing in common. They live in a state of wonder and awe by digging deep into each moment and creating memorable experiences which bring meaning to themselves and others. Time is not on our side. It's flying by. Who knows what the world will look like years from now? But I know one thing. At the end of our lives, we only have one possession which matters as we draw our last breaths. That's the stories we have to tell. The wealthiest people die with a timeline filled with stories populated by meaningful relationships and moments of wonder and awe and depth and courage and gratitude. Mary Oliver, the woman who first taught me to see the power of poetry, asks us an important question. What will you do with your one wild and precious life? And today I ask us the same thing. And if we don't know, that's okay. We're about to dig into some practices to help you recover the magic. The backyard is awash with sunlight now. It will be hot soon. 2 ducks just flew over my head. Ducks in the Austin suburbs. Can you believe that? We have ducks on our roof, far away from a pond, far away from surfaces that are friendly to webbed feet. Ducks. Magic everywhere. And to think I almost missed it. So after the introduction, I invite us to reflect. For you, when is a moment recently that you had a wonder and awe experience where you feel like you just stop in the middle of whatever you're doing and you notice the breeze for the first time, or you notice something about your home or a relationship you didn't notice before, or you just think to yourself, I'm going to remember this. I'm going to remember this. This matters. Could you share, if you wouldn't mind, in the chat, when was your last moment that you just thought, oh, I was awe-stricken? Feel free to share in the chat.
Reagan, I can go.
Oh, good. Get it.
I think. Oh, you want to do it in the chat, or are we talking out loud now?
I did want to do it in the chat, but
Yeah.
because you did this, I want to hear it, and then it's going to inspire people to do it in the chat.
No.
I go. You talking
Okay.
now? Go.
All right. Apologies for not following the directions, but I think when we first went into lockdown here, I'm in Columbus, Ohio. We tend to live in an area that has a lot of traffic, generally speaking, that you can hear from our house. And what was amazing to me was being able to walk out on my porch, and I realized this is a luxury of time thing, and not hear a single plane in the sky, not hear a single car on the street, and just hear the neighborhood for what it actually was. And to see all the people that I had not noticed before walking around and getting out and being active. That was a real eye opener for me, to think that our lives could shift so dramatically and force us to look at things differently just by nature of our situation. So just wanted to share that. Apologies for sharing out loud.
No apologies. What you did is you participated without worrying about the consequences. So see, I'm going to Venmo you for that lesson that you taught us. Beautiful. Thank you. Bill tells us the seasons show up and they give him a reaction that causes him to be in the moment. Rebecca was on a walk with her toddler, seeing the magic through their eyes. Oh, I love it. And Jean visited White Sands recently. Beautiful. Nathan was in Joshua Tree recently. He had some moments of solitude. Oh my gosh. And on it comes, sitting around a table with friends, the spider in the corner of the shower, these small moments that we miss if we're not careful, that slow our lives down and root us in the meaning of living. You know these moments. Thank you for your willingness to share. Thank you for your openness. We all have moments of wonder like this every once in a while. But I can assume many of us are here because we can get distracted from them. We can go through a season where we feel like my head has been down this whole season, or I feel like I'm missing some of those moments. So before we talk about digging deeper into moments like that so we don't miss our lives, let's talk about what gets in the way. Let's talk about what distracts us. So Wyatt is here. Wyatt and I lived in South Dakota together for a couple of years. And so there's a season in my life. I graduate college in 2008. Bad time to get a job. I get a job I hate. I live in my parents' garage. The entire year rushed by. Like I fast forwarded the entire year, right? I didn't want to remember any of it. I needed an adventure. So I heard about Teach for America. And if you sign up for Teach for America, they'll send you someplace for 2 years to teach people in communities that are under-resourced. So I wanted to go to New York or Chicago or Washington, D.C. And they said, we can send you to a reservation in South Dakota in a town of 400 people. And I said, okay, let's do that. And so I go off on this wonderful adventure, but here's what we humans tend to do. I thought that this adventure was going to deliver me all of the answers that I was looking for. But soon I'm in South Dakota and I'm teaching and I'm going through the motions and I'm waiting for the weeks to end. And I'm thinking about what grad school I'm going to go to after I finish teaching. I'm thinking about what am I going to do when I leave South Dakota? And before I know it, I'm fast forwarding through life again. Thankfully, I had a call with a friend of mine who I shared all my plans after this experience. I shared all my plans with him. And he said, how many more years do you have? I said, about a year and a half. He said, brother, you need to slow down. He said, what if the answers that you're looking for are hidden in the moments you're currently avoiding? What if the answers that you're looking for in your future are hidden in the moments you're currently avoiding? So I slowed down. So I tried to do a few things differently. So I tried to notice the spider in the corner of the shower or the flowers or the weather. But we all have this tendency to fast forward through our lives. So I want to read through an excerpt from a chapter called Fast Forwarding Through Our Lives. Aren't you glad it's titled that? Me too. And I'm going to talk about my youngest brother, Gavin, here, who also looks like Jon Snow. So this is from the chapter, fast forwarding through our lives. My youngest brother visited me once in Austin, and we went to the campus of the University of Texas, where he wanted to enroll. He had big plans for what his future would look like there as a freshman in the English department. He told me what he was going to be involved in, and he had ideas about what he was going to do after he graduated. Not even out of high school yet, his vision for his life was through college and on to what was next for what it could be. And I remember thinking, pump the brakes, bro. Don't miss the final moments of high school. I almost did. This is the first day I realized that I was getting old. This is what old people say: enjoy it while it lasts. I'm not shaming my brother for his excitement about the future. He inspires me, nor intending to paint aspiration in a bad light. But there is something to learn here. He, as the youngest, wanted desperately to grow up. There are seasons, I bet, when he would have gladly pulled the golden thread, as Peter did in the classic children's story, Peter and the Golden Thread. You know it, right? Your grandparents might have read it to you from Aesop's fables. Here's my reinterpretation. Peter, an excitable young boy, longs for the future and is restless in the present moment, until one day he's wandering in the forest and meets an old woman who gives him a silver ball with a golden thread protruding from a hole. "This is your life thread," she tells him. And she then explains if he doesn't touch it, life will pass by normally. But if he wishes time to pass by more quickly, he can tug on the golden thread to speed up his life. Well, he leaves it alone for a while, but what begins as a desire for him to skip a school day so he can go home and play turns into an obsession with the future Peter can't escape. He then wants to skip the summer, so he pulls on the thread. He wants to fast forward being finished with school and apprenticing as a carpenter, so he pulls on the thread. He wants to jump to the moment he's married, so he pulls on the thread, and he wants to skip enlistment in the army and so on. Before Peter knows it, he's at the end of his life. The golden thread has faded to silver, then gray. His wife is sickly, and his kids are gone. Downcast, he goes on a walk, an old man now, and meets the same woman in the forest from years before who asks him if he's lived a good life. To which he replies, I'm not sure, Peter said. Your magic ball is a wonderful thing. I never had to suffer or wait for anything in my life, and yet it has all passed by so quickly. I feel that I've had no time to take in what has happened to me, neither the good things nor the bad. Now there's so little time left, I dare not pull the thread again, for it would only bring me to my death. I do not think your gift has brought me luck. The old woman, after chastising him for being foolish and a foolish and selfish man, she grants him one more wish, and he wishes to live his life again with all the pain and anticipation and boredom included. Peter wakes up as if from a dream to find himself a boy again in bed with his mother calling for him to hurry up so he's not late for school. He breathes a sigh of relief and returns to his life with a new clarity that each moment matters. He goes on to live a different life, believing every second carries meaning. You can also see the film Click with Adam Sandler, which is a newer interpretation of this, and it's actually not so bad. So we have this tendency to fast forward through moments of our lives for reasons different for each of us. For some of us, it might be anticipation of the future if you're more forward focused. For some of us, it might be agony in the present that we want to escape. For some of us, it might be just like an overall sense of ambivalence to what's going on. During this season of COVID, maybe many of us wish that we could press the fast forward button because we're just bored as hell. But if we get to the end of our lives, the only currency that we've got are memories of the moments that matter with people who we care about. So I ask us to reflect for a moment. What are moments in your life, either presently or in the past, that you find yourself tending to want to fast forward through? What are seasons that perhaps you wish to escape? Maybe you've recently taken on a new role and you just wish you could blur through all the orientation stuff and get to the point where you've got the skills. Maybe you're in a season of uncertainty and you wish that you could fast forward to certainty. Hannah says school. Hannah, we feel your pain. I wish I could fast forward through school. What else do we have? What else do we wish that we could fast forward through? I was literally just on a call with students from A&M, and we stayed afterward to talk about this. And many of them said, but what does it look like to have meaningful moments in the midst of doing someone else's bidding? What if my time is not my own? How do I dig into those moments? I would rather just get through it toward the result. But we're missing these moments. We're missing these moments that one day we will wish that we had again. Sandy says she wishes that to get past the uncertainty of whether she'll have a job after the first of the year. I don't want to live in this angst, right? Like it's great, it's grating me. So can I just skip this part? Nathan's an actor. He says he definitely finds himself wanting to fast forward the time between jobs, but he often reminds himself that this is most of his life. And this is where he does some of his best work as an artist. These are the in-between times. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Sandy. You know, movies play a cruel trick on us because movies tend to show a character reaching their destination and transforming into the person that they want to be. But they have that part called the montage where they play Eye of the Tiger. You know what I'm talking about? Or they have the part where the bobsledding team from Jamaica gets really good in like 2.5 minutes. So they show the part that we have to do the work, but they do it a disservice because they fast forward through the small and quiet moments we must consciously engage in if we want to show up for the bigger, meaningful moments. We cannot have montages in our lives, meaning we can't fast forward through them. Sometimes for you, a montage might be 10 years. My poetry professor in college, she told me that there was a season that she didn't write a poem for 10 years. And so she worked counting pills at a pharmacy to put into bottles. 10 years, she waited. And instead of fast forwarding through her life, she used that to grow her. So thank you for sharing about moments that you might rush past. Maybe something didn't come to you clearly just yet. I invite you to consider that. I invite you to move into the next week being more aware. What are you fast forwarding through? And I guarantee you it will be time you will wish you could recover one day. Okay, so, okay, Reagan, I get it. I'm doing the fast forward thing, but what am I supposed to do? Or what's wrong with me? Why can't I just be more like, grounded in the moment and grateful all the time? So our brains were designed to keep us alive and burn calories efficiently, which means that our brains are worried about survival and anxious about what comes next and whether or not we'll have enough. You worrying is proof that your brain is doing its job by trying to keep you alive and anticipating future threats and scenarios that are going to be uncomfortable for you. But it's kind of outdated wiring. We don't have to worry about the same things to survive that we used to have to worry about. And so we can rewire our brain, even though it wasn't designed to help us find meaning and fulfillment. We can rewrite the outdated software by learning to slow time down. We can learn to slow time down. So I worked for this nonprofit here in Austin, and I met with college students all day. I advised them on their college careers. And I would do like 8, 10 meetings with college students a day. Walk them down this hallway. We would meet in this one room, walk them back to the hallway of the main room, and then I'd get another student and so forth and so on. And I can't tell you how many miles I walked back and forth down that hallway. And I was tired of this job and I was ready to be done. And I was fast forwarding moments of my life. But one day I passed through that hallway, and just by the grace of the universe, I thought to myself, this hallway has been good to me. How many times have I gone through this hallway unaware of this moment? And so I vowed that that hallway for me would be a portal. That hallway would be a portal in which I chose to slow time down and be conscious about exactly what was happening, not thinking about the next thing. One afternoon, I wrote this poem about that hallway. It's titled This Hallway Now. This hallway now is the kindest it's been to me. Today I passed through new and old shadows, my reflection against the glass. And this must be healing, passing through the same space, but with a softer breath, a shining light inside of me, nudging me forward, past the stretch where I used to stop and long for something else. Through I go now, seeing everything. Through I go. For you, what might a portal be that can ground you in time? I'm going to read an excerpt from a chapter called Slowing Time Down, working title, about this idea to help us understand what's happening in our brain. So I went to college about 4 hours away from home. I remember the first time driving south on Interstate 35 from the north suburbs of Dallas, Texas to Texas State University in the Hill Country. It seemed like an eternity. I noticed all the roadside attractions, and I remember being keenly aware of the beginning of the Hill Country and what it felt like to drive through Austin. Everything was new and memorable and passing across my windshield exactly at the speed of the present moment. Since college, I mostly remained in Central Texas, so I drive the I-35 route hundreds of times. So now a 3-ish hour drive is a couple of podcasts, a couple of phone calls, and a stop at Buc-ee's, because you have to do that. I barely remember anything else. It's just muscle memory. Recall the first time you made a drive somewhere, like to your grandparents' house, or to your college campus, or to even a commute to a new office building. The first trip that you make is the longest. Think about it. Then each subsequent trip, time seems to speed up. You get in your car, sip your coffee out of the same tumbler, listen to the same radio show, call your mom like you always do, and that you're at work before you know it. Like bam, 40 minutes in the blink of an eye. The more we do something, the more quickly time passes. Consider this. How many times have you lived through a month in which your head was down and you banged out your routine, followed the plan, and checked all the boxes, only to find yourself at the beginning of the next month asking, where did October go? Try as you might, you literally can't remember a specific day of October because you did the same things you always do in rapid succession without deviating from the plan. And on top of that, then we say things like, well, that month flew by, or man, that was just September and we're in November now. The more we drive somewhere, the shorter the trip seems, and the less we pay attention to the scenery. It's like a time warp. And the more we fill our months with the same activities, the fewer days we remember. Instead of remembering the trip to the latest exhibit in the museum, or the date to the new restaurant, or the time we had a dinner party with our neighbors or helped a friend move, we just say, well, that was October, or that was fall of 2020. Or for some of us, that was the 90s, or college, or my first marriage, or my 30s, or when the kids were around. We lose specific moments to these just buckets of time with only a few memories rattling around the bottom of the otherwise empty container of our life experience. but it doesn't have to be this way. We can slow time down so we don't miss our lives. So my dad taught me this right before I went to college, and it changed everything. I want you to think about that first story that I told you where I went and I got a job right out of college in the recession in 2008. And I lived in my parents' garage and I just went to work and did the routine and the time flew by. So if we were to pull the timeline of that year and chart it of that year of my life, I could look back on that year and I could say, well, I probably remember like the first day of the job, like that's a hash mark. I definitely remember the day that like I found out about Teach for America. I went on one date during that year. So I remember that one date. And then I definitely remember the last day of that job. In between the hash marks on the timeline of that year is just a blur like a bullet train, rapid speed of time that I can't remember. But let's juxtapose it with this decision to move to South Dakota. So I go to South Dakota and oh man, okay, so I moved to a new state. So I drove further than I've ever driven. So I taught English for the first time ever. So I met people that I never met before in my life. I joined a band where I played the bass, even though I didn't know how to play the bass. And we threw a party one time where we flooded our basement on purpose. And we took a road trip to Montana one time. And all of a sudden, you look at a year of my life that has probably 150 or 200 hash marks of memorable moments that are grooved in to my memory. And guess what? That year was the longest year of my life. I slowed time down. I figured out a time machine. For you, if you were to draw a timeline right now, if you were to draw a timeline of your life right now, how many new, different, and memorable things would show up? Ellie, my girlfriend, and I, at the end of every week, when we're having dinner on Friday, we ask one another one question: what will you remember from this week? It is an effort to create a story worthy life that we will remember. So all of the sudden, the hash marks on the timeline of our life become the way that we measure time. We begin measuring time in memories, not in minutes and months. Instead of saying that was October or that was fall semester, we say, was that before or after we had that dinner party with that neighbor that we don't know? Or was that before or after we block walked for that candidate? The more memories we add to the timeline of our life, the less of our life we miss because the moments become sticky. And then we learn to measure our life differently by memories. And we don't miss those. We remember the first time we did things. We forget the 100th time we did them. Now, you can't change everything. You can only brush your teeth so many ways. Like you can only drive your car legally so many ways to work, right? Like I'm not saying that you need to move houses every 6 months or ditch your friends every quarter and make all new friends so that you slow your time down. But I am saying, in the midst of what seems to be the mundane progression of your life, what might you do differently so that you can remember that week as a moment that you were courageous or loving or did something uncomfortable, as opposed to that week that you just followed the routine? So the challenge here is that no one is ever going to hold us accountable for this. But like, we get to spend our time however we want. But I ask you, what do you want? At the end of your days, like me when I'm my most scared, do you really want to have had an efficient life? A life that others validate? A smooth journey? with no conflict? Or do you want to have lived a meaningful life? And by living a meaningful life, I mean a life filled with memorable moments. And by a life filled by memorable moments, I mean a life that stretches so that you get to be here longer in your experience. We grow in the moments that we are present and participate. We forego our growth when we fast forward. So what does this look like for you? What does it look like to make a few small daily decisions, to notice when you're fast forwarding, and to recognize opportunities to add some new hash marks onto your timeline? We're all beckoned to do this, I believe. I'm going to read an excerpt as we wrap up this evening called Answering the Call. So what is this really all about? It's about living differently. It's about answering the call to a new way of living. This is the hardest work. So we enjoy the big stories and the big adventure and the long view of our life. But answering this call is going to require a presence and a moment-to-moment willingness most of us are unwilling to cultivate. In the hero's journey, there is always a call to adventure for the main character. But what we often forget is that in most stories, the hero often also refuses the call before they take it. This is an essential part of the story. Simba did not want to go back to Pride Rock. He refused it because we don't want to change. But we must be prodded by fate. And we must be prodded by the story of our lives over and over again. We must be reminded over and over again to change our wiring so that we live differently and we participate now instead of anticipating there. Joseph Campbell, the godfather of the hero's journey, he puts the refusal of the call this way. The refusal of the summons converts the adventure into its negative. Walled in boredom, hard work, or culture, the subject loses the power of significant affirmative action and becomes a victim to be saved. His or her flowering world becomes a wasteland of dry stones, and their life feels meaningless. We have the call to answer always. It's available to us always, sometimes in big ways and sometimes in small ones. But we often willingly miss the call, and subsequently we miss our lives because the call forces us to do the thing that we least want to do, and that's change. Yet the call continues to be available. Not always as a strange mentor meeting us in an alley or a treasure map that we find in an attic. No, the real call happens in the quiet of our heads. It's the still small voice. It is the nudge or the bothersome thought, the gut feeling, the tug, the nagging idea, beckoning you to stop and try and steer the fish with the shadows of your arms. The better parts of ourselves are calling us to fully engage in our lives and be parts of moments we'll remember and share with others. Call it God or the universe or goodwill or higher consciousness or the muse, as Stephen Pressfield does. There's a force calling us to better living. There is a guiding voice pushing us to evolve past our base needs, past our default nature to protect ourselves and indulge in thoughts and activities and relationships which keep us safe and waste our time. There is a calling for all of us, and that call is to change. Whether it's changing our perception or our behavior or our thoughts or opinions or demeanor, responses to the world or the way we treat ourselves or someone else, living a life we don't miss is ultimately about transformation. The good news is it's simple. It normally involves small shifts. Will you stop and talk to your neighbor or not? Will you attend the party or not? Will you pick up the phone or not? Will you make eye contact with the man who stands with the sign at the intersection near your home or not? Will you turn off the TV and sit on the porch and ask your partner to tell you about their childhood? Will you walk through the woods as a grown adult just to remember what it's like to be a child? Your transformation requires only your participation. It's meant a lot to have you here, and I'd love to hang around and answer any questions or have any discussion. I do want to share a quick thought. All this came from at the beginning of COVID. The Pope delivered this homily, and I can't find it, but the Pope delivered this homily at the beginning of COVID, where he said something to the effect of, "Don't miss this moment of suffering. Don't miss this moment of being tested. Don't miss this opportunity to connect with people, even though you can't connect with them in person. Don't miss this opportunity to learn, even though you don't want to. Don't miss this." And he just had this assonance of don't miss this, don't miss this, don't miss this, don't miss this. And I thought that's what I want to talk about. So it is my urge for you to join me. And it's not something that it's not a switch that we flip. It's a daily decision to not miss our lives, to realize the answers are here and that we'll figure it out. If instead of waiting for the thing to come, we don't miss this moment and we're brave enough to participate. I really appreciate you being here and not missing this. Barbara says, when can we expect the book to be out? I've been doing all these business self-awareness classes I have to do. I've had to learn how to keep myself accountable. And so the reason why I did this tonight was because I knew that if I put out some sort of external expectation, my ass is going to be on the line. So thank you all for being a part of my accountability mechanism as well. I'm hoping to, and this leads into kind of a way to continue to be engaged, if you like. I'm hoping by the end of this month to have drafts in the hands of people who would be willing to give it a pass and give me feedback. And then I'm hoping by, like spring of next year to like be close to shipping this thing. But the immediate deadline is I want to give it to like 10 or 15 people to take a look at. So that is a potential way to stay engaged. If you're interested in that, just say me in the chat if you'd be willing to take a look at it as I develop it. I'd love that. And I'd love to open it up for any questions or comments, anything that I could clarify.
Ask them to do their mic. Ask them to do their mic.
Oh, and take off your mic if you have any questions or comments.
Reagan, I have a question that I'm assuming you have probably addressed somewhere. It's the idea, you mentioned it early on, one of my struggles is the uncomfortableness of relationships, meaning that you know that those relationships are key and important, but you don't want to bother the person. You don't want to dive in too deep. And then you find yourself going months and months without doing something you should have. And I get it. It's to your point, it's a daily prompt of yourself. But is there any wisdom that you can depart that maybe makes that easier on people, not just myself, I'm sure it's most of us here, any kind of wisdom that says, here's how and why it matters.
Here's how and why it matters to connect with one another, even if it's difficult.
Yeah.
Man, thank you for asking that, Bill Duffy. And by the way, if anyone is on a time crunch, please feel free to go, but I would love to hang around and do this. Man, that's a really meaningful question because I spent much of my late 30s in isolation with some story in my head that relationships weren't that efficient or people always needed something from me. or nobody could speak the language that I spoke. And so it just, why do we both even need to try to connect whenever it's clear that we're not connecting? But then I read the book, Into the Wild, where Chris McCandless goes on this journey of a lifetime and he ends up dying alone in Alaska. And one of the last journal entries in his book was that he had lived a grand adventure, but the greatest tragedy was that he didn't have anyone to share it with. And so for me, dude, I will default to keeping the front door closed every day of the week because I got this illusion that I'm going to get more of what I want out of life if it's just me, myself, and I. The only thing that I've found in the medicine that I'm trying to write about in this book is the power of reflection and realizing that, Reagan, you actually know yourself better than this, because if you were to chart the data of how many parties that you went to that you thought were BS parties on the drive home, how many times did you say to yourself, I'm really glad I went? It nears 100%. So if we can spend a little, and there's going to be a reflection exercise on called, you know yourself better than that. So like if we can do a bit of reflection to understand what our default proclivities are, which inhibit meaning, perhaps then we could, I even have a couple of videos of myself to my future self saying like, Reagan, you know, you should work out this afternoon because you just finished working out today in the past and it felt good. So like, dude, the only thing we can do is stumble forward with the tools that tend to work for us. But I will say the hero's journey. So all heroes' journeys, all good stories, they basically have one story structure, which is a character who wants something and is willing to overcome conflict to get it. That's what stories are. A character who wants something is willing to overcome some sort of conflict to get it. But one part that I think that we often forget to add to the end that I think the best stories have, a character who wants something, who's willing to overcome conflict to get it, and in the process saves the lives of others. The best stories are about us doing things together. That's the best response I can conjure.
Excellent.
Thanks for the question.
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment. I love that sort of sketch that you did of the timelines and sort of the hash marks and how our lives are sort of measured by the benchmarks in which sort of stand out to us the most. Using that same analogy, I think that one thing that also works with that is that, you know, the spaces in between those hash marks kind of blur together, and if we ignore those, the beginning and end of that timeline become shorter, right? So exactly like you're saying, the way that time passes, if we're measuring things only by what is memorable, and we're saying no to participating, the beginning and end of those timelines kind of gets squashed a bit. So great analogy. I hadn't seen that before, and yeah, I definitely appreciate that.
Nice. Dude, if someone that I lived with like my whole life is surprised by a tool, that's a win. So I'm glad you never heard that one, Gav. So in kind of what I think I hear you saying is like, in addition to us creating memorable moments that are hash marks, that we can use as anchors, say, well, that was before or after I did the thing that I was really scared to do, but I was glad I did it. Like, we also have to make sure that the moments in between, like, even if nothing's going on, we need to be really aware and embrace those for what they are.
Yeah, or just simply the fact that if you got more hash marks on your line, that's going to be a longer line, right? It's going to extend out into the future. It's going to be more that more to remember, more to recount, more of those benchmarks that slow time down. So, yeah,
Dude, yes. And as a friend of mine, Chris McAllister, says, and this doesn't pixelate. Like, no matter how much you zoom in, it never gets fuzzy or pixelates. Like, you can add as many hash marks as you need to. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, man. Thanks, Sandy, for being here. Any other thoughts or questions? I'm really grateful for these. One of the things I always feel compelled to say is, good stories and memorable lives. That's not about like crazy mountaintop moments. Like it's not about climbing Mount Everest. Sometimes people will tell me, "Well, I'm just from rural Texas. Like, what is my life?" And I'll say, like, "Have you ever seen the movie Precious? Like, about a mother trying to navigate a really difficult relationship with her family and raise a kid? Like, that's the hero's journey of someone just trying to make it through their daily life. Like, so the meaningful moments don't have to be grandiose. Uh, they just have to push you to grow and cement you in time." Any other thoughts or questions? Thanks, Barbara, for being here. Um, from the bottom of my heart, thank y'all for being here. I'm looking at a mosaic of encouragement. Like when I see all of your faces, I see, you know what, it's okay to do something that's kind of scary. And I hope that whatever is kind of scary for you right now, that I can step in for you and tell you it's worth it. And I hope you reach out to me if you want to talk about it. Thank y'all for being here. I'll hang around, but feel free to jet if that's your evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Reagan.
Thank y'all.
Thank you, Reagan.
Thanks, Reagan.
Thank you. Y'all are the best.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Like this whole afternoon has been pretty great. Like a lot of the stuff has been, I don't know, something about Dr. Redwine. He just seems to put people into his classes. And like, it seems like we've had so many guest speakers and every single one of them, it's been like, I really needed to hear this. And so
Bro,
thank you. Thank you.
Mark, thank you, brother. Thanks for taking a chance to come to a thing with a guy you just met 2 hours ago. Reach out to me if you need anything and we can talk.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right.
It was 100%.
All right, buddy. All right, brother. See you.